All right, let's just jump right in. We're going to talk about a true legend of manga. And look, you might not even know his name, but I guarantee you felt his influence. We're talking about Mitsuteru Yokoyama. So, what's the deal with this guy? I mean, his career was massive, spanning decades, and the sheer amount of stuff he created is just mind-boggling. It really makes you wonder, was this guy a one-in-a-million creative genius, or was something else going on behind the scenes?
Okay, so here's the thing. The key to figuring him out is to stop thinking of him as this temperamental artist waiting for a muse to strike. He was the total opposite. Let's call him the anti-genius.
Yeah, his appeal wasn't about some kind of crazy, unpredictable spark. It's actually way more about cause and effect. His creative process, it wasn't random at all. It was a rational, almost industrial system, something born directly out of the world he grew up in. So to really get him, you've got to get his air. And I mean this literally. The world he stepped into as a young man didn't just shape his career, it basically built it from the ground up. So let's set the scene. Yokohama's coming of age during the post-war reconstruction of Japan. He skips higher education and dives straight into the chaos of the 1950s rental manga boom. And you gotta understand, this market was a beast. It wasn't about creating some slow, methodical masterpiece, no way. It was all about speed and volume and churning out stories people could read fast. This was his boot camp. And to survive in that kind of pressure cooker, he had to come up with a formula, a system. Everything he did was for speed and clarity. The good guys were good, the bad guys were bad. The plots were super straightforward, even the characters' faces. They're often kind of blank, almost unemotional. And that wasn't because he was a bad artist. It was a choice. Simple expressions meant the story could just fly. Now, this whole philosophy led straight to his first huge hit, Tetsujin 28 Go. You might know it as Gigantor. But this wasn't just a cool giant robot story. It was hiding a pretty specific worldview right in plain sight. I mean, think about it from their perspective. Technology had just caused unbelievable destruction in the war, right? But at the same time, it was the only thing that could rebuild the country. Yokoyama absolutely nails this duality. See, Tetsujin 28 isn't a hero with a conscience. It's just a thing, a powerful, neutral tool. It does whatever the person holding the remote tells it to do. And that right there, that's the core philosophy of his work. Power itself possesses no good or evil. This one idea, that power is totally neutral and it's all about who's using it, that becomes the spine of pretty much everything he ever made, from sci-fi robots to massive historical sagas. Which, hey, is a perfect segue, because that brings us to what he's probably most famous for. As he got older, Yokoyama took this systematic approach of his and pointed it at something totally new. Giant, sprawling historical epics.
So, why the huge pivot? Why suddenly turn to something like Chinese history? Was he just a history buff? Well, not really. It was actually a super calculated, logical move that fit his creative engine like a glove.
Think about it. These massive historical stories were the perfect playground for his style. They aren't about one hero's emotional journey. No, they're about complex systems. You've got a massive cast of characters, alliances that are constantly shifting, and the winners are decided by strategy and group tactics, not just by one guy's feelings. It was like a giant machine, and he was the one who could draw the blueprint. His goal here wasn't to write some emotional masterpiece that would make you cry. It was to create an understandable historical narration. He wanted you to get it. He was all about cause and effect, about where all the pieces were on the board. He basically treated history like a giant epic game of chess. And by doing that, he made these super complicated stories accessible to millions of people. So let's put all the pieces together. You've got the style forged in the rental market, the core philosophy about power, the systematic way of telling stories. What does it all add up to? Well, it creates his enduring legacy, the enduring blueprint. And just how successful was this blueprint? Get this, his manga version of The Romance of the Three Kingdoms has sold over 60 million copies, just in Japan. That's what happens when you perfect a system. And how did he pump out so much work? He basically ran his studio like an assembly line. He had a big team of assistants and set up what's called a bungyo system, a real division of labor. This wasn't about one guy pouring his soul into every single panel. It was about creating a consistent, reliable, reproducible product, month in, month out, for years. Now, you absolutely cannot talk about this era without bringing up the other giant in the room, the god of manga himself, Osamu Tezuka. But Yokoyama was smart. He knew he wasn't going to beat Tezuka at his own game. So you know what? He didn't even try to compete. He just built his own domain.
And the difference between these two titans is just night and day. Tezuka's whole thing was the hymn to life, diving deep into psychology, emotions, constantly innovating with his art. Yokoyama, he went the other way. He focused on structure and placement. He became the master of story logic, of the nuts and bolts of cause and effect that make a story feel, well, real and unbreakable.
So in the end, his legacy isn't some flashy art style that a million artists tried to copy. It's something much more fundamental. It's the blueprint he left behind for how to build an unbreakable narrative. He showed generations of creators how to construct a story that just works, a world with a solid foundation that makes sense. In a world that can feel pretty chaotic, he gave readers a universe that was, first and foremost, understandable. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question, especially for right now. Think about our world today. Streaming services, endless content, the constant demand for more, a world where mass production and consistency are king. Who's the more relevant guide for creators today? Is it the revolutionary innovator, the genius like Tezuka? Or is it the master system builder, Mitsuteru Yokoyama?